guys, welcome back. So in this tutorial we're going to continue where we left off after using pixels, and we're going to move on to EM. So what is EM? So EM is another unit you can use to style a website. So there is a massive debate whether to use EM over REM or REM. Well, today I'm going to try and demystify that a little bit and discuss what is the better one to choose and why it's better to choose. So you might be thinking, okay, well, what is EM? So EM is a unit that is relative to pixels. So if, for example, you've got a website that uses pixels 16 by default, then that is equal to 1 EM. So you might be thinking, well, how am I going to know what is what? Well, what you can do is there is a couple of websites which I'll show you now. Okay, so here we have a website that will calculate which EM you should be using based on the pixel size. Okay, so if we've got a default pixel size of 16, okay, so if we then use a pixel size of, again, 16, it equals 1 EM. If we're using 100 pixel, we've got 6.250. So the reason a lot of people debate whether to use REM or EM is because the way EM works. So EM works based on the pixel size of the HTML document. So what that means is, if, for example, we have HTML with a font size of, say, 18 pixels, and then we move further on and go within the P and do font hyphen size and do 1 EM, we're not going to get the expected outcome of what we're after, because what it's doing is the EM is inheriting the font size of the HTML document. So the way EM works, it inherits each time. So if, for example, we then have a div with a font size of, say, 100 pixel, we're going to have some serious problems crop up, because what it's going to do is you're going to have the 18 pixel and 100 pixel and then the 1 EM. So what it's going to do is going to inherit that, it's then going to inherit that, and then it's going to times it. So the way it works out is, if we go back to our website, okay, if we've got 18 pixel and 100 pixel, it works out as being 5 EM, right? But if we go 16 pixels and convert that, you can see it's 6.250 again. Well, that's not technically correct, because you'd be thinking if you're 16 pixels, you'd have 1 EM because it's 16 pixels. But it doesn't work, because it's inheriting the 16 pixel. It's then inheriting the 100 pixel. It's then calculating to becoming 6.250. So that's the problem with EM, is it can get quite confusing and become quite difficult. So that's why there is a debate, whether you should use EM or REM. The good thing about EM, though, is it's flexible. When I say flexible, when we was looking at pixels, it's static. We put 100 pixel sentence up, and then we scaled this down. So let's give you a bit of so you can actually picture this. So this is sentence about nothing. We'll save that. Okay. So we now have a font. So as you can see, 1 EM is definitely not 16 pixel, as we discussed. But if we remove this, okay, and remove this, Save that. There it is. Right. Wonder where it went then. Right. So as you can see, it's now based on the 16 pixel default size of a HTML. Right. So if we went back to our 100 pixel, again, when we resized it previously, as you can see, we now get a scroll bar. It's not responsive, it's static. But the good thing about EM, so if we go 1EM, save that. Actually, let's make that bigger like we did before. So let's make that 6.250, which I believe it was. Yep, there we go. Right, so if we now go, see that? It instantly, it was sizing. I mean, now this scroll bar here is now looking at the width of the page because the page is static. But if we was to actually do a little bit responsive design, this particular text will scale correctly. It won't become rather hard to read. I know that's not a great example because it is still scrolling. However, if let's see if I can quickly HTML. Actually, let's do body width 100%. So you haven't seen this yet, so I'll discuss that later on. Right. Okay. So if we now scale. Okay. So we have got a scroll, but if you actually notice, we're getting more on the page than we were previously. Again, I know this is not a great example, but just remember that the font size itself is flexible and it's responsive. So the text is always going to be the same size no matter what. Whereas with the pixels, it is the same size, but it's not flexible, so that when the page then becomes smaller, it's not going to be very readable. Okay, there's plenty of websites in which you can look at and read about differences between REM, EM, which is the better one. I will post that in the description below, which is a rather good website that discusses it and shows you a couple of images, and it summarizes the differences and what one to use, when to use. Um, I could discuss what they've discussed, but it's going to take a long time because the page is quite long and descriptive. So I'll post that in the teacher's notes down below, and then you can have a good old read up, have a play around, and have a good understanding of the differences and what you should be using. But I will be going on next to REM, discussing what it is, how it works, and then we can then move on and start looking at the box model and start actually putting together a website for ourselves once we've got an understanding of the basic layouts. So I'll see you in the next one.